half-raised arms beckoning, the shadow of a dog slouching between the flares. I remember these things, and the men who greeted me at Nungwe, but I took off again after dawn without learning anything about the success of their operations or the wealth of their mine. It wasn't that they meant to keep those things concealed. It was just that they had other things to think about that night, and none of them had to do with gold. I had been working out of Nairobi as a freelance pilot with the Muthaiga Country Club as my headquarters. Even in 1935 it wasn't easy to get a plane in East Africa, and it was almost impossible to get very far across country without one. There were roads, of course, leading in a dozen directions out of Nairobi. They started out boldly enough, but grew narrow and rough after a few miles, and dwindled into the rock-studded hills, or lost themselves in a morass of red Murrum mud or black cotton soil in the flat country and the valleys. On a map they look sturdy and incapable of deceit. But to have ventured from Nairobi south toward Machakos or Magadi in anything less formidable than a moderately powered John Deere tractor was optimistic to the point of sheer whimsy. And the road to the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, north and west through Naivasha, called practicable in the dry season, had, when I last used it after a mild rain, an adhesive quality equal to that of the most prized black treacle. This minor defect, coupled with the fact that thousands of miles of papyrus swamp and deep desert lie between Naivasha and Khartoum, had been almost flippantly overlooked by a government road commission, which had caused the erection near Naivasha of an impressive and beautiful signpost reading, "To Juba, Khartoum, Cairo." I have never known whether this questionable encouragement to the casual traveler was only the result of well-meant wishful thinking, or whether some official cursed with a depraved and sadistic humor had found an outlet for it after years of repression in a muggy Nairobi office. In any case, there the sign stood like a beacon, daring all and sundry to proceed, not even with caution, toward what was almost sure to be neither Khartoum nor Cairo, but a slough of despond more tangible than, but at least as hopeless as, Mr. Bunyan's. This was, of course, an exception. The more traveled roads were good, and often paved for a short distance. But once the pavement ended, an aeroplane, if one were at hand, could save hours of weary toil behind the wheel of a lurching car, provided the driver were skillful enough to keep it lurching at all. My plane, though only a two-seater, was busy most of the time, in spite of competition from the then barely budding East African, not to say the full-blown Wilson, Airways. Nairobi itself was busy and growing, gateway to a still new country, a big country, an almost unknown country. In less than 30 years, the town had sprung from a collection of corrugated iron shacks serving the spindly Uganda Railway to a sprawling welter of British, Boers, Indians, Somalis, Abyssinians, natives from all over Africa and a dozen other places. Today its Indian bazaar alone covers several acres. Its hotels, its government offices, its racecourse, and its churches are imposing evidence that modern times and methods have at last caught up with East Africa. But the core of it is still raw, and hardly softened at all by the weighty hand of British officialdom. Business goes on, banks flourish, automobiles purr importantly up and down Government Road, and shop-girls and clerks think, act, and live about as they do in any modern settlement of 30-odd thousand in any country anywhere. The town lies snugly against the Athi Plains at the foot of the rolling Kikuyu Hills, looking north to Mount Kenya and south to Kilimanjaro in Tanganyika. It is a counting house in the wilderness, a place of shillings and pounds and land sales and trade, extraordinary successes and extraordinary failures. Its shops sell whatever you need to buy. Farms and coffee plantations surround it for more than 100 miles, and good trains and lorries supply its markets with produce daily. But what is 100 miles in a country so big? Beyond are villages still sleeping in the forests on the great reservations, villages peopled with human beings only vaguely aware that the even course of their racial life may somehow be endangered by the persistent and irresistible pressure of the white man. But white men's wars are fought on the edges of Africa. You can carry a machine gun 300 miles inland from the sea, and you are still on the edge of it. Since Carthage and before, men have hacked and scrabbled for permanent footholds along the coasts and in the deserts and on the mountains, and where these footholds have been secured, the right to hold them has been the cause of endless dispute and bloodshed. Competitors in conquest have overlooked the vital soul of Africa herself, from which emanates the true resistance to conquest. The soul is not dead, but silent. The wisdom not lacking, but of such simplicity as to be counted non-existent in the tinker's mind of modern civilization. Africa is of an ancient age, and the blood of many of her peoples is as venerable and as chaste as truth. What upstart race, sprung from some recent callow century, to arm itself with steel and boastfulness, can match in purity the blood of a single Masai Murani, whose heritage may have stemmed not far from Eden? It is not the weed that is corrupt. Roots of the weed sucked first life from the genesis of earth and hold the essence of it still. Always the weed returns, the cultured plant retreats before it. Racial purity, true aristocracy, devolve not from edict nor from rote, but from the preservation of kinship with the elemental forces and purposes of life, whose understanding is not farther beyond the mind of a native shepherd than beyond the cultured fumblings of a mortarboard intelligence. Whatever happens, armies will continue to rumble, colonies may change masters, and in the face of it all, Africa lies and will lie like a great, wisely somnolent giant, unmolested by the noisy drum-rolling of bickering empires. It is not only a land, it is an entity born of one man's hope and another man's fancy. So there are many Africas. There are as many Africas as there are books about Africa, and as many books about it as you could read in a leisurely lifetime. Whoever writes a new one can afford a certain complacency in the knowledge that his is a new picture agreeing with no one else's, but likely to be haughtily disagreed with by all those who believe in some other Africa. Dr. Livingstone's Africa was a pretty dark one. There have been a lot of Africas since that, some darker, some bright, most of them full of animals and pygmies, and a few mildly hysterical about the weather, the jungle, and the trials of safari. All of these books, or at least as many of them as I have read, are accurate in their various portrayals of Africa. Not my Africa, perhaps, nor that of an early settler, nor of a veteran of the Boer War, nor of an American millionaire who went there and shot zebra and lion, but of an Africa true to each writer of each book. Being thus all things to all authors, it follows, I suppose, that Africa must be all things to all readers. Africa is mystic. It is wild. It is a sweltering inferno. It is a photographer's paradise, a hunter's Valhalla, an escapist utopia. It is what you will, and it withstands all interpretations. It is the last vestige of a dead world, or the cradle of a shiny new one. To a lot of people, as to myself, it is just home. It is all these things. But one thing, it is never dull. From the time I arrived in British East Africa at the indifferent age of 4 and went through the barefoot stage of early youth hunting wild pig with the Nandi, later training racehorses for a living, and still later scouting Tanganyika and the waterless bush country between the Tana and Ati rivers by aeroplane for elephant, I remained so happily provincial I was unable to